I told my pilot not to file the route publicly. I know how insane that sounds. A man my age should know better than to cross oceans because of a feeling he cannot fully explain. But I think I crossed the point of rationality the moment I realized silence from you hurts louder than noise from the entire world. And that's the problem. You became quiet, not angry, not emotional, just quiet. Do you understand how terrifying that is for a man like me? I've stood inside factories louder than thunderstorms. I've watched rockets explode in front of me. I've lost billions in a single day and still slept at night. But your silence, that made me pace the floor at 3 a.m. like a frightened teenager pretending to be a genius. Because silence from a woman usually means one of two things. She's finally healing, or she's finally leaving. And I don't know which one you're doing. That's why I'm coming. My pilot found your address 2 nights ago. He asked me twice if I was serious. I told him yes before my fear could answer for me. Do you know what scares me most? Not rejection, not embarrassment, not even the possibility that you open the door and look at me like a stranger. No, stop. If I told you I left my bank account in the description and asked you to send me money right now, would you actually do it? And be honest, would it be $1, $2, $50? I want you to tell me the exact amount in the comments. No fake answers, no pretending to look generous for strangers online, because this isn't really about money, it's about trust. It's about how quickly people emotionally connect to someone behind a screen. Even when they know almost nothing about them, some people would scroll away immediately, some would laugh. Some would actually open the description just to check if the account is there. And that says something powerful about human emotion. We live in a world where attention has become emotional currency. People donate to creators they've never met, defend people they've never touched, cry for voices they only hear through headphones at night. So I'm curious, what makes someone worthy of support in your eyes? Is it honesty, pain, consistency, or simply the feeling that they understand you when nobody else does? Comment the amount you would honestly send, even if the answer is 0. Because sometimes the truth about people becomes visible in the smallest decisions. What terrifies me is arriving one day too late, Rand, discovering another man, learned how to love you gently while I was still overthinking everything, because that would be my fault, not his mine. I kept believing there would be more time to explain myself, more time to calm down, more time to become emotionally ready, more time to stop carrying the damage of my past into every beautiful thing that tried to love me. But love does not wait for emotionally organized people, and neither do women, especially women who have already survived disappointment. You know something strange? The world thinks men like me are fearless, but powerful men become cowards in very specific ways. We hide inside work, inside schedules, inside ambition, inside impossible missions, because building companies feels safer than telling one woman, I need you more than I expected. Do you know how humiliating that sentence feels inside the chest of a man who spent his whole life trying not to need anyone? And yet, here I am, on the edge of boarding a plane because one woman started feeling more important than my ability to stay emotionally protected. You did something dangerous to me. You made peace feel addictive, not excitement, not obsession. Peace. Your voice slowed my thoughts down. Your presence made me less violent with myself. Even your questions changed me, especially the difficult ones. Why do you always sound like you're preparing for loss? I remember when you asked me that, I laughed, but afterward, AB sat alone for almost an hour because I realized nobody had ever noticed that before. You did. And once a woman sees the frightened man beneath the successful one, he can never fully hide from her again. That's why this is dangerous, because if you reject me now, you won't just reject the public version of me. You'll reject the version that finally stopped pretending, and I don't know if I survive becoming emotionally invisible again. Tell me something honestly. Have you ever met someone at the wrong time, loved them in the deepest way anyway? Because I think that's what happened to us. You arrived when I was emotionally exhausted, suspicious, half-healed, still carrying old betrayals like they were permanent injuries, and maybe you felt it. Maybe that's why you started pulling away. Maybe you got tired of being patient with a man who could build futures for humanity. Rat still struggled to say simple things like, "Please don't disappear." I wanted to say it, I just didn't know how. Men like me are trained to solve problems, not confess fear, so instead of saying, "I'm afraid of losing you," I became distant, and distance creates misunderstandings that love alone cannot survive. That's the tragedy nobody warns you about. Sometimes people do love each other. They just fail at timing, communication, and emotional courage. And I think about that every night now, especially after what happened last week. You probably don't even realize what you did to me. You said, "Maybe we should stop before this becomes harder." Do you understand what that sentence did inside my head? I replayed it 100 times. Because women only say things like that when they've already started preparing themselves emotionally for goodbye. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe properly. I started imagining absurd things. You meeting someone calmer, softer, more emotionally available, a man who doesn't hesitate before loving you openly, a man who wouldn't make you question your worth while he fights battles inside himself. And the worst part? You deserve that man. That's why I panicked. Not because I own you, because I don't, but because for the first time in years, AB found someone I genuinely did not want to lose to my own emotional limitations. That changes a person. You know what else changed me? The night I almost called you, then stopped because I thought, she deserves peace more than confusion. I put the phone down, then picked it back up 10 minutes later, then put it down again. It's pathetic, isn't it? A man capable of making impossible decisions, completely collapsing over one woman's heart. But that's the truth, and I haven't told you the real reason yet. There's something I discovered recently, something that made me realize I cannot afford another second of hesitation. I almost told you yesterday, but if I say it now, everything changes. So first, I need to ask you something. When I finally stand in front of your door, will you look at me as the man who arrived too late? Or the man who finally chose you before fear destroyed everything? And before I continue, if this confession is finding you at the right moment, quietly subscribe, so maybe I can keep speaking to you like this again. And tell me where you're listening from tonight, because part of me wonders how far love can travel before two people stop running from it. I keep thinking about the last time you looked at me like you were trying to decide whether I was safe, not impressive, not powerful, just safe. That question haunted me more than any market crash ever could. Because a man can survive being doubted by the world. He can survive being underestimated. He can survive headlines, noise, pressure, and distance. But when one woman starts asking her heart whether it can trust him, that is where the real damage begins. I did not tell you something important. I kept it buried because I was afraid it would sound too vulnerable, too late, too selfish. The truth is, AB did not ask my pilot to find your address so I could storm in and win you back. I asked because I needed to know whether I was about to lose you without ever standing still long enough to admit what you meant to me. That is the hidden thing I have been carrying, not control, not pride, fear, pure, humiliating fear. The kind that makes a man who has spent his life making decisions for other people suddenly unable to decide what he is feeling until the opportunity begins slipping away. And once I saw your address written down in front of me, everything in me changed. Suddenly you were no longer a thought. You were no longer a possibility. You were a place, a real one, a door, a hallway, a woman on the other side of something I may not get to cross twice. Do you know how strange that is? For years I built things that could be measured, towers, vehicles, systems, timelines, outcomes. But you made me face something I could not engineer, a feeling with no blueprint. A feeling that does not improve with data, a feeling that only becomes more dangerous the longer it is denied. I think that is why I hesitated with you, not because I did not care. Because I cared in a way that made me lose the coldness I usually use to protect myself. And once that coldness cracks, a man like me becomes vulnerable to every memory. I remember your patience. I remember the way you did not chase me when I withdrew. I remember how that hurt me, because it made me realize you were not one of the women who confuse availability with love. You were watching, waiting, not forever. Just long enough to see whether I would become brave. That kind of waiting is more intimate than people realize. It says, I am willing to give you time, but not my soul. And that is exactly what made me panic. Because I knew if I misread you, I would not just lose a conversation. I would lose the chance to build something real with the kind of woman who does not need spectacle to know her own worth. Tell me honestly, how many times have you almost loved someone who kept making you feel like your heart had to audition for a place in their life? How many times did you stay soft while someone else stayed uncertain? I think about that when I think about you. And then I think about the moment I almost let the wrong woman distract me. Yes, that happened. Not because I wanted her, because I was tired. And tired men make terrible emotional decisions. There was a moment when I almost confused attention for peace. There was a woman who spoke easily, smiled quickly, and never asked anything difficult. For one brief, weak stretch of time, I thought maybe that was the safer road. Maybe that was the easier ending. And then I felt it. That emptiness, that thin, hollow silence that comes when a man is about to trade something meaningful for something convenient. I hated myself for that moment. Because even in my confusion, I knew the difference. One person made my life simpler. You made my life truer, and those are not the same thing. The truest things are rarely simple. They demand honesty. They demand timing. They demand the courage to stand in front of another human being without the armor. That is what you asked for without saying it directly. And I failed you there for a while. I see that now. I see how my silence probably felt like punishment. I see how my hesitation probably felt like rejection. I see how the distance I created may have taught you to protect yourself from me. That is the cruelest part of all this. We can wound each other by accident and still carry the bruise as if it were chosen. I do not want that between us, but wanting is not enough anymore. That is the lesson I am finally learning too late, because now there is a flight. There is a route, there is a door, there is a woman whose address is in my hand like a confession I can no longer pretend I do not have, and there is one ugly, unavoidable possibility that I arrive and find you already halfway gone from me. That possibility is eating through me. I can feel it in my stomach, in my jaw. In the way I stop breathing, whenever my mind imagines your voice sounding distant. What if you are already trying to let me go? Because loving me feels like standing too close to a machine that was never built for tenderness. What if I was the man you believed in just long enough to be disappointed by? I do not know whether that thought hurts more because it might be true, or because I cannot stop caring whether it is. This is where it becomes irreversible. Because once a man starts driving toward the woman he loves with the full awareness that he may be too late, he is no longer pretending. He is choosing, and choice has consequences. There is no clean return after that. No graceful retreat, no clever explanation that makes the heart feel less exposed. Only this, I am coming, and I am no longer sure I will be able to hide what your absence has done to me when I stand in front of you. I almost turned the plane around, not because I stopped wanting to come, because I finally understood what this means. There is a kind of silence that breaks a man, not the silence of empty rooms, not the silence after a phone call ends. The silence that follows the realization that you may have waited too long to be honest with the only person who made your life feel less mechanical and more human. That is the silence I am in now. And I can tell you something terrifying. It is louder than any crowd I have ever stood in front of. I thought I was prepared for this. I thought all that remained was a difficult conversation, maybe a little pain, maybe some tears, maybe the dignity of telling the truth before the opportunity disappeared. I was wrong. Because now that I am close enough to feel the consequence of my own hesitation, everything inside me is collapsing into one question. What if I am not the man you needed in time? What if I am simply the man who arrived with regret? Do you know how cruel that feels? To be successful in every place that has no heart, uncertain in the one place where the heart matters most. That is where I am now, on the edge of a decision that no amount of ambition can solve. I keep thinking about the woman you are when nobody is asking you to perform, not the version people see, not the one they assume you, the quiet one, the one who notices tone before words. The one who can tell when someone is hiding behind confidence, the one who does not fall for charm, if charm feels like a disguise. That woman is the one I could not stop thinking about, and maybe that is why I became so dangerous to myself. Because the deeper I cared, the less control I had, and the less control I had, the more I began to fear my own mistakes. A man in my position can afford many things. He can afford delay. He can afford distance. He can afford to call hesitation timing. But he cannot afford to lose the one person who saw through all of that and stayed long enough for truth to matter. And you did stay, long enough for me to realize what I had. Long enough for me to realize what I was risking. Long enough for me to realize that maybe the problem was never your uncertainty. Maybe the problem was mine. Because I kept asking for love like I wanted it to be patient with me forever, while I gave it so little certainty in return. That is not fair. And the worst part is, I knew it. I knew I was doing it. I knew I was making you wait inside the shadow of my emotional inconsistencies. I knew you were feeling the weight of my fear, even when I did not say it out loud. And still, I let the fear keep speaking for me. That is the kind of failure that does not just hurt another person, it humiliates the self. Do you ever wonder what a grown man sounds like when he finally runs out of excuses? He sounds like this. He sounds like a confession held together with too little sleep and too much memory. He sounds like someone who has spent his whole life building things that move fast enough to escape his own vulnerability, until the one thing he cannot outrun is the possibility of losing a woman who never asked him to be perfect. She only asked him to be real, and I have been trying, in my clumsy way, to become that. But there was a moment earlier today when I nearly made the wrong choice. I saw an old message, one of those harmless, innocent invitations that appear at exactly the wrong time and sound easier than truth. For a moment, just a moment, I imagined taking the easier road again. Imagine postponing the discomfort. Imagine choosing the conversation that required less emotional risk. And I felt sick, because I recognized myself in that temptation. I recognized the old habit, the habit of choosing whatever lets me avoid being fully seen. And then I thought of you, not your face, not your voice, your disappointment, because that is what I fear now more than anything. Not that you will stop loving me, that you will understand me too well and decide I am not worth the ache. That would be fair, that would be devastating, that would be earned, and maybe that is why I keep coming back to the same brutal truth. I cannot build a future with a woman who has to wonder whether I will disappear every time life becomes emotionally difficult. You deserve steadiness. You deserve the version of love that does not turn into a riddle every time intimacy gets real. And I know that. I know it in the part of me that never lies. That is the part that is breaking now. Because once you admit someone is worthy of the love you keep withholding, every excuse becomes uglier, every delay becomes selfish, every silence becomes a choice. Every day you let them believe confusion is temporary becomes another day you make them carry what should have been shared. I did that to you, and I hate that I did. I hate that I may have taught you to doubt a feeling that was real simply because I did not know how to hold it properly. That is the near loss, not the flight, not the distance. The possibility that by the time I finally became brave enough to say your name honestly, you had already learned how to survive without waiting for me. That thought is almost unbearable, because if you survived me, then what am I arriving to protect? A memory, a hope, an apology, or an ending? I am standing at that edge now, and I can feel something inside me slipping, not dignity, not pride, something worse. The illusion that this could still be managed cleanly, it cannot. I know that now, if I keep going, I may find you. If I find you, I may have to tell you everything I have been avoiding. If I tell you everything, you may see exactly how frightened I am. If you see that, you may finally decide whether the man behind the power is worth the risk. And I do not know what terrifies me more. Being rejected by you, or being loved by you after I have already made you doubt me, because that kind of love does not come back unchanged. It either deepens, or it dies in the place where it was almost trusted. I wish I could tell you this with more strength. I wish I could speak to you like the outcome is already safe, but it is not safe. Nothing about this is safe anymore. I am on the plane now, and for the first time in a long time, I understand that I cannot outthink what the heart has already decided. I chose you too late to call it easy, and maybe too honestly to pretend I am calm. If I land and you open that door with disappointment in your eyes, I will have to survive the truth I have been postponing for far too long, and if you are gone, then I will have to face the kind of loss that does not sound dramatic from the outside, but quietly ruins a man from the inside for years. Because I did not come to win an argument, I came because something in me finally understood that love becomes real only when it risks being refused. And I am almost there now. Almost close enough to find out whether I am about to meet the woman who changed me, or the consequence of waiting too long to say what should have been said before the fear grew teeth. The hardest part was not the flight, not the waiting, not the fear, not even the possibility that you would refuse to see me. The hardest part was the walk from the car to your door. Because every step toward you felt like a step away from the man I had spent years pretending to be. Confident, controlled, untouchable. None of those men survive love intact, not real love. Real love strips away performance until all that remains is truth and consequence. And by the time I reached your door, I finally understood something that should have been obvious long ago. I was never afraid of loving you. I was afraid you would become important enough to hurt me permanently. That was the real reason. The truth I delayed, the confession underneath every hesitation, the hidden thing inside every silence. I knew the moment I let myself fully love you, you would gain the power to either heal parts of me nobody else could reach or destroy the fragile peace I had built to survive. So I kept standing halfway inside the relationship, half vulnerable, half guarded, half honest, half hidden. And people think partial love protects them. It does not. It only guarantees suffering arrives slowly instead of all at once. I see that now. When you opened the door, you did not look shocked. That destroyed me more than anger would have. You looked tired, not physically, emotionally. Like someone who had spent too many nights arguing with herself about whether waiting for me was wisdom or self-betrayal. And suddenly every delayed message, every emotionally incomplete conversation, every moment I disappeared into my own confusion, stood in front of me like evidence. I could not hide from any of it anymore, neither could you. For a second, neither of us spoke, and I realized something terrifying. Love does not die dramatically most of the time. It dies quietly, inside accumulated uncertainty, inside repeated disappointment, inside all the moments someone needed reassurance and received ambiguity instead. I almost lost you that way, not through betrayal, through inconsistency. That realization broke something open inside me. Because standing there in front of you, I stopped thinking like a man trying to protect himself, and finally started thinking like a man who understood the cost of making the woman he loves feel emotionally alone. Do you know what I wanted to do in that moment? Not kiss you, not impress you, not persuade you. I wanted to apologize for every time my fear forced you to carry confusion you did not deserve. That was the first honest instinct I had. And maybe that is how I knew this was real. Real love becomes less obsessed with being chosen and more concerned with whether the other person felt safe while loving you. I had not given you enough safety. I gave intensity, attention, connection, long conversations, emotional sparks, but safety, not enough. And women always know the difference, especially women who have already suffered before. You looked at me for a long time. Long enough that I started preparing myself for goodbye, and I deserved that fear. Because you cannot repeatedly make someone question your emotional presence and then act surprised when they eventually protect themselves. I finally understood your silence. It was not punishment, it was exhaustion. You were tired of translating feelings. I should have spoken clearly myself. And there is something deeply painful about realizing the woman you love became quiet because she no longer had energy to keep reaching into your emotional distance. I think that was the moment I truly changed. Not when you smiled. Not when you let me inside. No, the moment I changed was when I understood that love is not sustained by chemistry alone. It survives through emotional reliability, through choosing the person clearly, repeatedly, calmly. Not only when fear of loss becomes unbearable. That was my mistake. I waited until almost losing you to become fully honest. And some people never recover from that timing. I know that, which is why I finally told you everything. About the fear, about the other woman I almost used as emotional escape, about the nights I stared at your messages, trying to sound unaffected, about how deeply your possible absence had already begun reshaping me. And then I told you the ugliest truth of all. I think I loved you long before I was emotionally mature enough to carry it properly. That sentence cost me every remaining piece of armor I had left, but it was true. And truth changes the atmosphere between two people. You can feel it when it arrives. It removes performance from the room. For the first time, I was no longer trying to sound intelligent, or composed, or impressive. I was simply trying not to lose the woman standing in front of me. That is when you finally spoke. Quickly, you asked me something so simple, it nearly shattered me. Why did you come now? Not last month, not before the distance grew, not before the confusion exhausted us both. Now, do you know what I answered? Because I finally understood something too painful to ignore. The future means nothing if I build it without the person who made me want to become softer inside it. And for the first time since arriving, you cried, not dramatically. Just enough for me to realize how much strength it must have taken for you to remain composed while loving someone emotionally complicated. I will carry the guilt of that forever, but I will also carry something else now. Clarity. Real clarity. Not the kind people post online. Not temporary emotional urgency. Not fear disguised as romance. Actual clarity. The understanding that love is not proven by intensity during crisis. It is proven by emotional consistency after vulnerability becomes inconvenient. That is what I want with you now. Not fantasy, not emotionals, not uncertainty disguised as depth. Just honesty, steadiness, presence. And maybe that sounds less exciting than the beginning of our story. I think mature love is supposed to feel less like chaos and more like finally putting down a weight you were never meant to carry alone. I do not know what happens next. Maybe we heal slowly. Maybe we struggle sometimes. Maybe trust rebuilds carefully instead of instantly. But at least now you know the truth. I did not come because I was lonely. I came because losing you finally hurt more than facing myself honestly. And maybe that is what love really is in the end. Not finding someone perfect. Finding someone who makes you tired of your own emotional hiding.